Welcome to Myco Minute, conversations about collaboration brought to you by the capacity creators at Myco Consulting LLC, where we help higher ed, nonprofit, and philanthropic leaders advance the initiatives they care about most.
Hey all, Deb Mashek here. I managed to screw up the video recording from today's conversation with Kyle Emile. Kyle had so many wonderful insights to share. So rather than junk the episode, I'm just going to share out the audio and wanted to let everyone know that you can connect with Kyle via the free IC website, which is freeic.org. That stands for Free Intelligent Conversation. And speaking of which, enjoy the conversation. Thank you. Hi, I'm Deb Mashek, and today I am speaking with Kyle Emile, who is the founder and executive director of Free Intelligent Conversation and also strategic partner manager of commerce at Facebook. Kyle, welcome.
Hello, I'm excited to be here.
It's nice to see you. I know we get to spend some time together. We'll talk about that later, about why I've seen you recently, but it's nice. I really appreciate you being part of this interview too. I thought we should start with your organization, Free Intelligent Conversation. What's the big idea? How does this work?
Yeah, so Free Intelligent Conversation, sometimes short by Free IC, FREEIC, was started as me trying to solve my own problem, quite frankly. And the problem that I was solving for was I was looking for a place to have conversations with strangers and learn from people of different backgrounds. And I just wanted to do just that. My friends had been going to venues, parties, bars, bookstores, events, meetups, whatever, to kind of do something like this. But the thing that I didn't like about those is that those events seem to be centered around something else. And then you kind of hope a conversation happens. And I was like, no, where do people go who just want a conversation? And there wasn't any public venue that facilitated that kind of interaction. So one day I had this idea that I would just go outside and hold up a sign that said Free Intelligent Conversation. I did this downtown Chicago on Millennium Ave, and just hold it up and invite people to talk about anything and everything. And that is what happened. People talked to me, and it kind of changed my life in terms of the kind of stories I was hearing or the people I was meeting. So I just kept doing it because it was rewarding in and of itself. As I continued to do it, my friends would come with me. The city of Chicago, people in Chicago kind of knew I would be out there. So people made their own signs and they would meet me out there and join me. And then we found out people were doing it in different cities in the US and then eventually different countries. And then this whole movement kind of kicked off. So now we are a nonprofit organization that works with people in their communities and to coordinate events centered around creating meaningful conversations with strangers.
So what was that transition like? So there's, this guy hanging out with a handwritten sign, or did you print that?
No, we printed it. We printed design. Design wasn't good though. It wasn't great, but
you show up for this first week and you go back, you've got this printed sign. What's the transition like to then become an organization? At what point, like what was going through your head? At what point were you like, oh my gosh, you know what we need?
Yeah.
You're going to need and it's a 501c3, right?
Yeah. We're a 501c3. Actually, there was one moment where we did an event, and I think we got in contact with a reporter from the Chicago Tribune who was so passionate and excited to tell our story in general. And that's kind of where it clicked, like, oh man, I think we really have something here, right? Like if other people are eager to tell our story and what we're doing, I think this is something that's worth pushing. And then the combination of that and just seeing like what it had done in just my own individual life and my friend's life. Like I have people who've met as strangers and then toasted each other at their weddings. I know people who found their been job offers or met someone they ended up dating. And I saw those kind of interactions come and kind of like the joy and that it brought to people. And I was like, this just seems like a thing to keep doing and grow. And then to grow it, we needed just infrastructure. And that naturally suited, it kind of just naturally followed to make it into an organization.
Yeah. I'm curious, what's been the most, or one of the most just profound or powerful experiences that you've personally had?
Yeah, so there's three that come to mind. I'll shoot them quickly. One, I met someone
You're
who
going to bring
actually,
like the emotion power. Let's like flood me with it.
yeah, I should say the first thing is I met someone who became a roommate of mine. We met outside in Dolores Park in San Francisco. I live in the Bay Area now, but we met outside Dolores Park, ended up hanging out, being friends, started hanging out. Both our leases was up at the same time. We decided to move in with each other, and that's someone who's become like a wonderful, one of my best friends out here. So
That is
that
a great success story for Free IC website. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's one. Another one that's happened is I met someone actually in the same place that I met this guy who became my roommate, but not at the same time. I met someone who actually works with the organization now, and they're a community manager. And I met them back in 2017, I want to say, and they've been involved in helping grow Free IC in other communities since. So that's also been really wonderful and really cool to go from someone that I met at an event that was so compelled and enjoyed the thing so much that they're actually part of the organization. And now they're a great friend of mine, someone I'm, chatting with multiple times a week about how do we grow and build Free IC. So that's been really cool.
Yeah, that's real.
Yeah.
It's kind of like with the reporter where there's something transformative happening.
Yeah, exactly. And then the last example is one time when I don't know, I must have been 20 something, very early 20s, very young 20, maybe 20, maybe 21. I met a girl who was the same age as me, and um, she had just been kicked out of school because her parents had called and said, "Hey, we can't afford to pay your bill." And they also told her, "Hey, we can't afford for you to come home. So like, you got to just figure it out." So she went homeless that semester. And I met her and I talked with her, and she was telling me, she was explaining to me the story. And, there's a sense of like, well, I feel like I got to do something. What can we do? And she just told me, she's like, honestly, I just appreciate that, since I've gone homeless, I've had very few times where I just chat with someone, genuinely and honestly. And she's like, I just appreciate that you're willing to do that. And that was one of a profound experience for me. For one, it was like, you know, hearing that kind of story, but also put a lot of things in perspective for me. Like, I think that week I just felt awful about, some exams or school stuff.
Right.
And my conversation with her just put in perspective how much I had to be grateful for. And then how much it could mean to someone that you just take the time to have a conversation with them, right? Like, just off the conversation, she felt like that was one of the best things I could have done for her. And she was so grateful for that. So that's an instance that stands out.
Wow. Yeah, that really, that notion of what it means to be present.
Yeah.
Somebody, and just whatever is there, and it's all okay to just to say. So for those who haven't had the experience of being in a Free IC event, how are these actually structured?
Yeah. So first, we have these signs and cards that we print. It says Free Intelligence.
I got one right
Oh
here.
yeah. Oh, perfect. Perfect. There's a sign right there. So we have these signs.
Can I tell you, this is from a couple years ago at an event
Oh wow.
in Washington Square Park. So here's the sign.
Perfect. Yeah, that's the sign. We have that sign. We also have these question cards that have questions focused on having pulling stories from people to start the conversation. So you typically stand out somewhere with high foot traffic. Well, first I should say, usually organize maybe a group of, sometimes as small as 5, sometimes as big as 50 people will go to an area, a place with high foot traffic, a park, maybe somewhere near where there's a lot of commerce, or maybe near like a train station, and people will spread out in the area, and they all hold up signs, and you stand there and smile. And for first, you're very nervous. It's just like, I've been doing this for years. You just get nervous every single time because you're just like, I don't know. You're like, what am I doing? Is this gonna work? But what you'll see happen consistently is people will walk by and you can just see the curiosity on their face. You can tell they want to come and have a conversation. But then someone will eventually stop and ask, hey, what's this about? And then we tell them to pick a card. And this is from the question cards we have. And they'll pick a card, whatever card they pick, that's what we use to start the conversation. So an example of some of these questions might be like, some of my favorite ones are like, if happiness was the national currency, what kind of work would make you rich? Or what's something you know a lot about that you think most people misunderstand?
Yeah.
Or when you think of home, what's the first thing that comes to mind? And we use that as examples of those examples to start the conversation. And then it's just up to you and the person you're speaking with, right? We tell people you can sit there and talk to someone for 5 minutes. You can speak to them for 2 hours. It's really your call. And then it's supposed to be as natural and organic as possible. So we just leave it to the discretion of the people there. And that's it. That's it. And then we typically end our events at a particular time. We tell everyone to meet back, and then that concludes it. So it's really straightforward and really simple.
That's beautiful. And so I've only participated in a couple of them, but I will say that, so I live on Staten Island, and I have this fantasy of doing a free IC event on the ferry, because oh, my dinner is ready. It's a 25-minute ferry ride. And it just feels like it'd be such a great time to sit out on the deck with people, but I don't want to do it during COVID. Speaking of which, I'm curious, how has the COVID context changed what free IC is looking like?
Yeah, so we did a handful of events in this last year, most of them virtual. And what that means is that instead of groups or communities going out to their local community and holding up a sign and speaking to people in the neighborhood, they actually just did it within that group. So we had a handful of those, like we did events uh, in Saudi Arabia. We did events in Netherlands that way, maybe some in Denmark. So we had a couple virtual events. We actually even also had an in-person event, strangely enough, kind of weird. I believe it's in Romania. There's a group, they all wore masks, they had hand sanitizers, wearing gloves, and they went out to their community and held up a sign to talk to people in their community. So that was really cool to see that, like, even when something like COVID's happening, people were willing to take the precautions and do what they can to just start a conversation, right? And I think that kind of spoke to how the need for people wanting to do that. So we've adjusted to that. A lot of things, what we've mostly been focused on is getting ready for the great reopening. We think that there'll be a big appetite for in-person events and having conversations with people once people can be outside and everyone's vaccinated. So we're spending a lot of our time getting ready and in anticipation for that.
I was thinking about that, where if ever there's a time where we're hungry for social connection, it kind of feels like now. And I know when I was at Heterodox Academy, we did an event between students at the University of Delaware and Lynn Benton Community College out in Oregon. And those students it was a free IC event, and those students never would have been able to have these conversations without the technology piece. So it seems like there might be some hidden gifts available too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so here's a question for you. So one of the things we have in common, in addition to our love of organizational strategy, which we'll talk about in a little bit too, is a love, oh, and my cat's going to come visit too. This is great. Is a love for thinking about human connection and what it means to connect across, or perhaps despite differences. And I'm curious, from your time at Free IC, what do you know to be true about connection?
That it actually just takes one person willing to be vulnerable. And it kind of like, what's this thing called accelerated disclosure is what I think it's called. And what happens is, at least in my time, what I've seen is just by willing and putting myself out there to have the conversation, maybe I don't have anything particular to say, but I'm willing to, people often reciprocate that. And that creates a kind of bond in the moment and in the conversation that is really strong, given how the context, and people will share so much about their lives and what they're going through. And you feel, and in a matter of minutes, you feel so connected to someone that was a stranger, 15 minutes ago. So I think that the thing I know about connection is that it takes one person willing to be vulnerable and willing to say, hey, look, I'm open to a conversation. And almost always that is, reciprocated. So
yeah, that signaling of the openness. It reminds me of, in the close relationships research, there's this paradigm called the fast friends study, or the fast friends intervention. And the close relationships researchers, including my advisor for my PhD, Aaron, they set up these experimental scenarios where total strangers would go and have these reciprocal self-disclosure conversations. So they would take about an hour, and you would start with really kind of mundane sort of disclosures. But by the end of it, you were talking about how do you think you're going to die? Or staring into each other's eyes for minutes on end, and really powerful connections developed out of this, including 30%. What was it? I wrote down the stat here that participants were feeling closer to their interaction partner, a total stranger, more so than the typical closest relationship of 30% of similar students. That there's something about that vulnerability and getting to see and be seen that's incredibly powerful.
Yeah. Wow, that's interesting. I didn't know that, but I can imagine based off my own experience.
So what do you think? Should we do a question or two? Do you have a card back there?
Oh, let's do it. Yeah, let me find one real quickly. I think they're right next to me. They're never too far from me.
Oh, I see. And I see a sign behind you.
Oh, yeah. I have a sign back there.
I will say during the political season, this is what was hanging up in my window instead of a political yard sign.
Yeah, that's a good
promoting connection instead of.
That's a good sign. Okay, so here's the first one I pulled. When was the last time you were inspired, and what was it that inspired you?
So the one that's coming to mind is when I was trying to think through, this is a couple months ago, and then I'm like, oh wait, surely I've been inspired since then. But I'm going to just share it because it was the first one that came.
Yeah.
That when I was trying to think through what to name my consulting business.
Yeah.
And I was inspired by mushrooms. So I'd been reading and listening to things about how mushrooms grow and how they digest the substrate that they're growing in, and it's really about decaying, but then these beautiful fruits emerge when the conditions are right. And that it just started to like totally work for me, like near tears level, like, oh my gosh, this is right. Like you want to, whatever your situation is, that you can take root and find others who are similar, like part of the same organism. And then when the conditions are right, you can bring forth this beautifully diverse set of ideas, and that some of the ideas will go off there like spores basically, but only some of them will create new life. And I don't know, just the idea was really uplifting for me.
That's good.
So now, do I ask you the same one, or do I draw?
Yeah, usually I would answer in return.
Yeah. How about you? When was the last time you were
inspired? I feel like my answer is going to be kind of cheesy. So I watched football on Sunday, American football, and I was watching Tom Brady, and I was thinking about Tom Brady and other examples like LeBron James, who are athletes who are pretty old for the field they're doing. I think Tom Brady's 43 playing tackle football. LeBron James might be 37. But those are pretty old considering, the sports they play. But what I was inspired by was that how long they've been good for. And sometimes one of the things I was thinking about is like, it's not good enough to aim for having a good year. Like, what does having a good decade look like, right? What are the things I need to set up right now so that I have a good decade or 2 decades? And I was inspired by, because I was thinking about both of them, and I was thinking, you can't be that good at this age, one, and you can't be that good for that long without setting up, without being very deliberate about that. And I was thinking about, forget like New Year's resolutions. Like, what's your decade resolution? What do you need to be to get to where you want to, to have 10 good years in a row, right? So I was inspired by them in their, being excellent for a long time and still striving to be so. So that's kind of like, I don't know, I guess my corny, easy example that came to mind, but I thought it was relevant.
Can I tell you, as you're talking, I feel this opening in my chest. Like there's some fascinating, just sort of like, that's inspiring. So I'm going to change my answer now and say to when I talked to Kyle about
No, so you want to do one more?
Sure, let's do another one.
Okay, we'll do one more. What would you be willing to reduce your life expectancy by 10 years for?
Oh, a guarantee that my child will be happy and healthy for those 10 years that I could trade them.
That's a good answer.
Yeah.
That's a good answer.
I get teary just thinking about it. Like, yeah, I would give that up in a heartbeat.
Yeah. I think my answer would be something like if it meant my family, maybe we're happy and healthy, I think that's what I would do. Or if I had to be more selfish, if I could take 10 years off, I would take 10 years off to make sure that my body at like in the final 10 years that I do have feels like it does now.
Well, and I'll just, echo from the previous question. We've got this decade thing going. So like if there's this,
Yeah,
excellent decade involves a swap for the vitality
yeah,
now.
yeah, exactly. So cool.
So here's one from the Aaron card deck. Do you have an intuition about how you're going to die?
Um, no, I think I'm gonna live to be pretty old. I think my family has lived pretty old, so I think I'm gonna be a while for a long time, and I think it's gonna happen in my sleep, just because I'm like just too old. I'm gonna be way too. I'm gonna be way older than I think I should be. So that's it. Or maybe that's what I hope it is, but that's it. I don't think. I think I'm gonna avoid a tragic death. I feel like I'm gonna live a long time. So, but fingers crossed.
Yeah. I think for mine, I think it's feel like it's going to be a gas explosion, which sounds very specific, but I'm legit freaked out by propane tanks, like at the barbecue, in part because I just don't understand how they work. So I'm always worried that it's going to explode in my face and I'm going to die.
Man, I that kind of the awareness you're talking about, I feel around cars recently. Like I was born in New York and I crossed the street like a New Yorker. If you've been in New York, you know what that looks like, right? You just cross the street. And lately I've just seen how like I've something about I'm like, wow, this is so fast and and I'm only flesh and bones and one of these are gonna hit me one day, right? So I've just been like watching that. But anyway, that's like your increased alertness around propane tanks is I've felt this way about cars recently.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
think I've also felt that way too. So because of COVID, I've just been in cars less often. I just haven't been in cars. And every time I get in a car, because it's been so infrequent, I'm like, wow, this thing is so fast. I'm like, wow, this is so easy to just go off the road. And when you're driving every day and going through everyday life, I guess I just wasn't thinking about being in a car that much. But now because it's so far in between, I'm so aware of like, oh my goodness, this can be so dangerous.
So related to that, I've been having all sorts of appreciation. Here's actually a more recent inspired one. All sorts of appreciation for the brilliance of other people. So like thinking like, oh my gosh, who figured out how to put all these parts together in a car to perform all these systems? And the one that's totally blowing my mind is who thought to time the little turntable in the microwave that if I cook anything for 30 seconds, like the coffee mug, if I put it here, it comes around, it stops right there again. I'm like deeply appreciative for whoever had the insight to make the little turntable so I don't have to come in at a weird angle to get my
Yeah, that's good. That's a good one.
simple appreciations. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about another organization that I know we both know and love, and it's also about connection, and that's Bridge USA. And in full disclosure, you and I are both members of the board, so we knew each other before then, and then we get to have this experience together. And I wrote down what Bridge is about, just so other people, in case they don't know it yet, we'll hear about it. So Bridge USA is disrupting and reinventing civic engagement on campuses by using a research-based approach to create the next generation of engaged, informed, and empathic citizens. Ultimately, we are an organization led by young people for young people. What draws you to the mission of Bridge USA?
I think that in my time, one of the things I've seen is that it's like people are willing to engage in conversations across differences. They just don't know how to, and they need a model of how to do that. Whether it's watching someone else do it, whether it's providing the opportunity for them to do it themselves, right? And I think that what I've seen is like when you are able to demonstrate an alternative way to interact, I think people see that. It's like, oh wow, I don't have to, be polarized, or I don't have to push back. And one other thing I like about Bridge is they are driven to create that opportunity to model that behavior for students on campus. And I think it's really important to get that model when you're young, right? And I think the college campus is a great time to be doing that because it's one of the times in your life where you're going to be surrounded by the most diversity of opinions. So the combination of those two things draw me to Bridge USA, and I believe in what they're doing, and that's why I joined the board.
Yeah, and it's so interesting to me that Free IC is about connection and relationships. Bridge USA is about connection and relationships. I was at Heterodox Academy, and it's about connection and relationships. And just that there really is this community of people who are so committed to connecting and elevating.
Tell me, what about you? What draws you to Bridge USA?
Oh, the same. And this idea that what we have in common, i.e., we're all humans running around with insecurities and concerns and worries and potential and gifts and light, and we're all naturally creative, resourceful, and whole. And that thinking of what I'm drawn to all of this is thinking about how you bring those people and those perspectives together in unexpected ways, and that the only way to really make that happen is getting to know each other. And the only way to enable that is through starting with a conversation, or starting with that moment of being uncomfortable and saying, I don't know about that person, or wow, they sure look different than me. I don't know if I'd have anything to talk about, and proving yourself wrong is, yeah. I don't know, just the unexpected connection draws me to all of this.
I love it.
Yeah. So one of the things I know about you, Kyle, is that you are one of the most brilliant organizational strategists that I've ever met. And I don't know if you recall, but we had a pancake breakfast once in Manhattan. Yeah. And I had been noodling over a theory of change and trying to figure out how to put all the pieces together. And I remember putting it in front of you and saying, hey, I don't know if you would mind, but just I'd love to get your input on this. And you were asking the most powerful, specific questions that connected the ideas on this piece of paper with the work we were doing and the vision for the organization. And I carry that with me. And so I'm curious, from an organizational strategy perspective, why do you think relationships matter? Why do all these connections matter?
So the first thing I should say is I'm first honored to have been of help, and flattered, and thankful for your kind words. The second thing I should say is, when in regards to strategy, why does relationships matter? I think my answer to this is similar to how I think about diversity. And the reason why, and what I want to say is, like, I think diversity is useful. I think of diversity as a means to an end, not an end of itself. And so the reason why is, I think, like, if you're solving simple problems, you don't need diversity. Like, I don't need diverse opinions on how to screw this light bulb in on my desk, right? I can do that pretty straightforward. But once you begin to attempt to solve complicated problems, the value of diverse, there's a relationship between how complicated the problem is and how valuable diversity of opinions become. Yeah. And basically, the more complicated the problem, the more input becomes valuable. And I think very similarly with relationships, I think, like, if you're doing simple problems, you don't need relationships. Like, you could just do them yourself, right? If it's simple, you know all the answers. And I think that as your problems become more complicated, it becomes more and more valuable to be able to have other ideas, other people who you can bounce ideas off of, even if they're not giving you new solutions, but they can take your own opinion and say, well, have you thought about it this way? Or why are you doing it that way, right? And I think having those kind of relationships to check yourself is wonderful. Now, I think that it's in all of our interests to try to solve hard problems or complex problems. And consequently, I think it's in our interest to have good relationships so that we can do that. And the thing specifically about relationships is that why you want to have good relationships, and you're not just throwing ideas out, on a form online and saying, hey, can anyone help me with this, is because with good relationships, you're not afraid of being wrong, right? Like, if in the best relationships I have, I say what I think are the dumbest things out loud, and know that there is goodwill in the response of the person, and that they are committed not to just answering this question, but they're committed to my net well-being. And that gives me the ability to think freely and tackle problems in the best way that I can, because I'm, unloading my arsenal and not being concerned about, man, am I going to be perceived a certain way? But I think to do that, you have to have good relationships. And that is the reason I think relationships are important for solving problems, specifically complex problems.
Powerful. Yes, 100%. Thank you. I think that's a great one for us to end on. Thank you so much for joining me today. And just to put it on the table, I'm a better collaborator because of you and the thinking that I've gotten to do alongside you. So I'm really appreciative of that, and I look forward to more in the future.
The feeling is mutual. I'm thrilled about every time we get the chance to collaborate, and look forward to future collaborations in the future.